Hey, it's Andrew here at BTO Range. On today's little tips and tricks episode, if you will, we've got a couple of different versions of the Savage Stevens 87 rifle, little 22 semi-auto rifle. And this gun was in line for a long, long time. I mean, from the Model 6 and Model 7 all the way through the 87, the 187, the 887. It's the same basic action, but there are some differences, but the same problems occur. So this one we've already repaired. This one we have not yet, but we're going to pull them both apart to a degree to show you what typically goes wrong with these guns and what to look for. So this is a Model 87A. This is the older of the two. And this is a 187, so it's the later. So typically when we see these guns come in, and they're discontinued now, but they're a pretty robust action and they're kind of unique. Some people call them, or they got the nickname, I guess, of the gill gun because of these vents on the back side of the receiver at the bolt on this older gun, the 87A, and it still carries through, but to a lesser degree on this later gun, the 187. So some folks call it the gill gun. It's also been called the clackety clack by what the action does. It's kind of unique. When you fire the gun, the bolt comes back, and actually the bolt doesn't go all the way forward again until you release the trigger. Pretty interesting action. So typically when we get these, it's a fair to chamber, fair to extract, fair to eject, and just like any other 22 rimfire, number one thing to do is clean the gun completely. So I'm going to pop both these out of the stock. So we're going to look at the similarities and the differences, and then the parts to watch out for on these guns. So both of these guns are similar in that they're just held together by this one large thumb screw on the bottom of the stock. It's captive, so it shouldn't just fall out on you unless there's something wrong with the ferrule inside the stock. So it shouldn't just come out. So we'll pop this stock off, set it to the side, and we'll pop this stock off and set it over here to the side out of the way. So you can see that there are some pretty significant similarities here. And we'll move these forward a little bit. And yet there are some differences. So the guns work in pretty much the same way. Tubular magazine feed. We have a lifter here that's operated by the bolt moving to the rear on both guns. That moves the cartridge out of the feed throat, and then the bolt moves it forward into the chamber. When it fires, obviously the gun cycles. So on both of these guns, on the same action, you notice you've got, there's a column here and a column here, and these seesaw back and forth on this pivot. So you have the primary sear here, which drops the hammer to move forward, and then you have this one here that holds the bolt to the rear until you release the trigger, and then the bolt's allowed to fly forward. So what are we looking for? What typically goes wrong with these guns? So you notice even the bolt plugs are different on these guns here. The trigger is different, and they won't fit in the same trigger guard. So when you look for parts on these guns, you have to make sure you're getting the right iteration. The extractors are different. It's the same theory, but very different parts. So once we move the back plug out of the way, we can remove the hammer, and you see the hammer is attached to the firing pin. That will allow us to bring that out, and then we can move the bolt out to the rear. We should be able to move the bolt out to the rear. Oops. Okay. So, and we'll go ahead and pull this one out too. Actually have the wrong tool to be doing that with, but okay. So there's a couple of things that we need to look at when we look at the 87s, and these are the parts that you need to watch for. This is the firing pin, this is the hammer, and this is the spring behind the hammer. So over time, this spring will take a set and it will lose the forward momentum, and this drives the firing pin forward along the channel in the bolt body to where it protrudes from the face of the bolt. So that's the impetus here. And when you trip the sear by pulling the trigger, this is allowed to slam forward, and it's that's what causes the gun to fire. So this entire series of guns is very much not designed to be dry fired. This is going to be hard up against the face of the barrel. So excessive dry firing of the gun will do two things. One, it will peen a small deformity on the chamber mouth to where the gun may not chamber because the chamber is out of round. And we use a tool called a chamber iron to go in there and make that round again. And it will also deform the nose of this firing pin. So firing pins are being remade, and on this gun that had happened. So what we had to do with this firing pin is we stoned a slight bevel on the forward edge of the firing pin to give it a bit of a chisel point, similar to a Glock pistol's firing pin profile. And then we also stoned the sides of the firing pin so that it runs smoothly in this bolt channel, so that there's nothing dragging to prevent the firing pin from making its complete forward travel. So that solved the failure to fire issue on this gun. So, and we've yet to really determine what's going on with this one. The firing pin doesn't looks like someone's already done that to this firing pin, to be honest with you. So we'll have to see what that is. But notice how different the bolt is between these two guns, the profile of the bolt. So although the guns are basically the same, they're in the same family, the parts went through several different changes. You see we have extractors here with extractor plungers on this older bolt, and this later bolt we have a straddle type extractor system here. So this is a failure point also, this extractor, this guy here. So that's fortunately that part is being remade, that extractor. Some other parts that are the typical failure to feed parts. If you can get in this ejection port here, you're going to see a ramp here at the top of the, that's moving right there, I'm moving it. That is a cartridge guide that guides the round off of the carrier as the bolt moves it forward. This is designed to guide it into the chamber and not up top. So this is an original part here. That is, there's a spring that lives underneath it that gives this spring tension here. So that spring fails, and then this just flops. And when that happens, then obviously you have a failure to feed issue. So the remedy for that is we have to pull these two pins here, bring the receiver off the back of the barrel, and then put the new part and new spring in there. There is another version of this part that is its own spring. It doesn't require a separate coil spring. It is a formed steel, spring steel part. I prefer this, to be honest with you. It seems to be a little bit more robust, but and those are interchangeable. You can retrofit that spring steel part into this instead of this part if you have to do that. I'm going to screw around and get these parts mixed up. Is what's going to happen. So notice also the feed throats on these guns are different. This 187 feed throat and this 87A feed throat. So this formed wire spring right here is also a cartridge guide spring on the feed throat of this 187. In both cases, these are just stamped metal parts, and they do fail. This spring is a common failure point on the early 87As. This spring is being remade. You should never ever buy used springs if at all possible, because you're probably getting a part that's at least as bad as the part you're replacing. So this little guy here, it just straps over this feed throat. To remove the feed throat, you have to pull the tube forward. The outer and inner magazine tube have to come forward, and then it's held in place by 2 screws on this side. And to pull those screws, you have to get this pin out of the way, and you have to remove the lifter. So this pin, around this pin, you see this spring here, the lifter spring. That is another failure point, but luckily that is being remade also. So what we would do on just a failure to cycle on these guns is we're going to replace this spring, we're going to replace this spring. We're going to make sure the lifter doesn't have side-to-side play in it. A lot of these have washers on each side or spacers on each side of the lifter inside the feed throat to keep it running true up and forward. Typically, we don't have to replace either of these sears, but it can happen. And if they get chipped out, then the gun, if the gun doesn't hold the bolt back until you release the trigger, the gun's not going to time well, and you're going to have a problem with that. So if that's the problem, you're going to have to replace that piston there, and they're just pinned into here. So this entire assembly is held by 1, 2 screws back here. And you can buy, sometimes you can find on eBay or wherever this entire assembly, maybe Gun Parts Corp has it in stock, but pay attention to the submodel because this trigger is profoundly different and they won't fit into the trigger guard and stock of the opposing model. The firing pins are also different in the placement. There is a version of this gun where the firing pin is placed further forward on the hammer. So you have to make sure you have the correct hammer for the iteration of the gun that you're working on. So they're can be frustrating to work on. They haven't existed new in a very long time, and they can be a little difficult. And it does require a little fitting and a little tweaking of parts. We've had some success. If we have a bent feed throat, we've had some success in actually straightening those out with a mandrel. Typically not. The better plan is to replace the feed throat if you can find one. That could be more difficult than others. Again, notice that feed throat is completely different here, and it does not have that cartridge guide spring that the older gun does. Here on the later gun, the 187, it doesn't have it. So the Springfield 87 series, there's a lot of them out there, and I truly don't know what happened here. That's some kind of weird coarse pipe thread on the end of that muzzle. I'm not sure who or how that occurred, but we haven't been asked to address that. We're going to address the cycling issue of this gun. So what our plan is we're going to replace this hammer spring, certainly, and then we should be able to make the gun run fairly well at that point. So the 87A series of rifles, and there was 87A series through N, I think, and they're going to differ in little parts. So you just have to be very conscientious about which parts interchange with which. And fortunately, Gun Parts Corp cross-references that particular issue pretty well, so you should be able to come up with how that works from what they've got. So anyway, that's the down and dirty on this particular series of 22 semi-auto rifle. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button, subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. Look at our Remembering the Past videos. We do a bunch of those every week too. So once again, appreciate you coming out, and we'll see you next time.